Welcome to Fierce Feminine Leadership, the success podcast for women in business. Each week, we feature interviews and advice to help you step into your power and lead your way. Now here's your host, women's leadership expert, Eleanor Beaton.
This is Eleanor Beaton. Welcome to Fierce Feminine Leadership, the success podcast for ambitious women in business. And you are listening to episode number 19. And we have an incredible show for you today. My guest is Julie Weeks, the president and CEO of Womanable, a for-profit social enterprise that works to enable women's entrepreneurship worldwide by improving the systems, laws, policies, programs, and research-based knowledge that support women's business creation and growth. Julie Weeks is one of the world's leading experts in the field of women's enterprise development. She's got experience in both the private and public sectors in the area of research, public policy, and program management. She's been doing this for more than 30 years. And it can be said that she is personally responsible for much of the research-based information on the state of women business owners and the state of their businesses in the United States. I had the opportunity to meet her last fall when I was a speaker at Accelerate, which is a fabulous business conference for women presented by Grow Your Biz, another excellent women's business association. I was so impressed with her knowledge, with her grasp of the details, and definitely wanted to bring her on to share her knowledge with you. What's really interesting about Julie Weeks, she started her business 11 years ago, and for the past 6 years, she has partnered with American Express Open to create and author the State of Women-Owned Businesses in the United States report. She's coming on today to talk about the 2016 numbers, and here's the big headline for you all. Women are fueling the post-recession business startup activity in the United States, and a huge boon is that women of color are playing an increasingly important role in that work. Huge for me. I'm a big fan of enabling women of diverse backgrounds to participate at the business table. As some of you know, I am an advisor to the Visiting Executive Exchange Program for Women at the Yale School of Management, and I am delighted to hear these statistics. Here are a couple of stats for you. There are now 11.3 women-owned businesses in the U.S., employing nearly 9 million people and generating over 1.6 trillion in revenues. Women-owned businesses now comprise 38% of the business population and employ 8% of the country's private sector workforce. And since 2007, there have been nearly 1,100 net new women-owned businesses launched each and every day. Some fascinating statistics and insight to share with you. I think you're going to really love Julie. She has a wonderful energy, and she's going to share some insight about her own business journey as well as some tips for those of you in terms of how to launch a business and build the credibility you need in order to land a partner like American Express. So, fierce ones, without any further delay, I present you with Julie Weeks. Come on! Julie Weeks, welcome to Fierce Feminine Leadership. And where are we reaching you today?
I'm in the beautiful state of Michigan, down under in the United States.
Awesome. And how's the weather there? Here in Nova Scotia, Canada, we're dealing with some rain. What are you dealing with over there?
Sunny skies, and the trillium are out, which is a beautiful wildflower. So yes, it's a lovely day today here in the Midwest and Michigan.
Awesome. Well, we're in the season of renewal, and I am so excited to talk to you about your new report, the 2016 State of Women-Owned Business in the United States. So what is the state of women-owned businesses in the United States in 2016?
The state of women-owned businesses is very strong. We've seen in this report that there are 11.3 million women-owned businesses in the country, that they're growing in number at 5 times the rate of all firms in the United States, and that there are, on average, 1,000 new women-owned firms starting each and every day.
Incredible numbers. And, this report, this is actually the 6th annual State of Women-Owned Businesses report that you have done in conjunction with American Express Open. How has this changed? How have the statistics that you're seeing in this latest report, how has that changed over time?
The numbers continue to grow at rates that exceed the national average. This time around, the rate is much stronger than the national average only because new business formation overall in the United States has not picked back up after the recession. So that difference is a little more stark, this analysis. And also there's continued growth, continued progress in a lot of areas, but not all areas.
Got it. Okay, so I'm looking forward to digging in a little bit more. When you take a look at the overall report, what are some of the most positive trends that you've seen?
I think the most positive trend, and this is something we started seeing a few years ago, but this year it's even more positive, is the firms that have been started over the last 9 years among women of color. They are starting businesses at a much, much faster rate than all women-owned firms. In fact, now they are 44% of all women-owned firms in the United States is owned by a woman of color. And over this period from 2007 to 2016, this is a period of analysis in this report, fully 79% of the net new women-owned firms in that time period are firms owned by women of color. So it's really nothing short of phenomenal.
That is absolutely phenomenal growth. And as a woman of color who is, has dedicated my career to helping diverse women succeed in business, huge win. How do you explain this rapid growth?
I think it's twofold. I think on the positive side, there are more and more women, and especially women of color, who are getting higher levels of education. They're getting higher levels of managerial work experience. So they're building up the skills, the tools, the connections that it takes to successfully start and grow a business. I think on the negative side, since the period of time we're looking at is pretty much post-recessionary, there may be some negative impacts of the recession on women of color more so than Caucasian women, so that they are underemployed or unemployed coming out of the recession, and therefore more are starting businesses, perhaps because they either don't have an option or they can't find what they really want to do. They're underemployed.
Got it. Okay, so let's take a look then at kind of the so-so news here. Lots of positive trends, particularly in the area of women of color starting businesses at, incredible rates. We're seeing a huge entrance of women, in over the last 10 years starting businesses. What are some of the so-so trends or the not so good trends that this report revealed? Right.
Yeah. Taking a look from, say, 2002 to 2016, back in 2002, 28% of firms in the country were women-owned, and now it's 38%. So that's the positive trend in the numbers. However, during that period of time, the share of employment that are accounted for by women-owned firms is relatively flat, has grown from 7% to 8%. Of all the private sector jobs in the country being contributed by women-owned firms. And revenue share is flat also. 4% of the business revenues in the United States are contributed by women-owned firms, and that has not changed over this entire time period. So that's the frustrating news. I guess the other so-so news is some of the fastest growth in terms of industry sector in this most recent period are among some of the smallest kinds of businesses, those that are not as likely to scale up into big businesses. The other services sector, which is kind of the et cetera services sector category, has doubled from 2007 to 2016, the number of women-owned firms in that sector. And that is the primary businesses in that sector include hair salons, nail salons, and pet sitting services. So those are essentially solo or very small businesses. So that's, I guess, the so-so news is that while the numbers of businesses are growing at a very positive rate, the size and the economic clout of those businesses is not keeping pace.
Now, this is interesting because, many of the women that I talk to, specifically those who are, leaving a corporate job, let's say, and dreaming of freedom and starting a business, they don't necessarily dream of starting a big business.
That's true.
Right. So how concerned should we be about the fact that we are not, despite the fact that there's an increase in the total share of women-owned businesses, our contributions to total revenues have stayed flat? How concerning is that, and how should we be interpreting that statistic?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think we should be somewhat concerned. I don't think we need to wring our hands and think it's terrible because there are a couple of reasons why this hasn't changed, which are a little detailed. But I would say that over the span of time since we've been counting businesses, or since the Census Bureau has, most businesses in the United States, and I would say most businesses in Canada and around the world, are single person businesses. I mean, it's always been that way. And in the U.S., it's about 8 in 10 businesses are just owned and controlled by one person who has no employees other than the owner of the business. And it's 9 in 10 women-owned firms. So there is a gap there, but most businesses are very small. I think another reason why we don't necessarily need to be overly concerned, I mean, I think we want to encourage women businesses to grow to the extent that they wish to, but part of the reason behind the fact that the share of employment and revenue hasn't changed lies in the definition of what a woman-owned business is, which is 51% or more owned and controlled by a woman. And as a business grows, if they add equity shareholders in the business, whether they share ownership in the business with the senior management team or with outside equity investors, the share of that business may drop below 51% for that woman. So the very largest women-owned businesses may no longer be majority women-owned. They may be women-led. So women are growing past the window of the definition of a woman-owned business. So I think that's why this employment and revenue share, or part of the reason why the employment and revenue share has not grown over time, is because the women are growing past the definitional limitation of what a women-owned business is.
Got it. So it's the classic taking a smaller piece of a much bigger pie.
Absolutely. And I think if we can look at women-owned or led businesses, we would see revenue and employment growing.
Got it. So what I'm taking away from what you're saying is, look, we want to enable and encourage women to grow their businesses and scale them as much as they wish. So it's somewhat concerning that we're not seeing the total shares of revenue, of revenue share that we'd like to. But there are certainly those women who are starting businesses for other reasons, other than growth. And if we take a broader look at what a women-led business looks like, where those numbers may look a little rosier.
That's true. And I would also add that part of the reason perhaps that women-owned firms aren't growing as fast in some areas, whether it be geographic or sector areas, is that a lot of the conversation around growth is an either-or proposition, and growth is put in very, testosterone-charged, shoot-for-the-stars terms. And I don't think a lot of women, and also a lot of men, don't want to grow that way. They want to grow more methodically, organically. They're not interested in growing really, really big. And I think conversations that we all have about business growth are focused on one way, the super highway of growth, as opposed to taking the secondary roads, so to speak.
Yeah, it's so interesting. One of my mentors said it once. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity.
That is absolutely true. If you have a smaller business that's very profitable, then you're in much better shape than a very large business that has no profit. You're a hamster in a wheel. Then you may be growing or employing more people, but you're not doing yourself any favors. And a smaller business, actually a community-based business that has roots, in a city, town, and area, is having a much greater impact on the quality of life in that area than a very big business that may pick up stakes and move somewhere else because they're chasing lower, taxes or something like that. So there's a lot to be said for the fundamental role that smaller businesses play in the health of the community.
Absolutely. Now, this report is a report, fabulous research report. It reveals statistics. It provides insight into the state of women-owned business. What opportunities do you see for women-owned businesses based on the research that you're seeing? What are the opportunities for women-owned businesses? What are the opportunities for perhaps legislators or the organizations that support women-owned businesses? Yeah,
we hope the role of this report is to get people talking, right? It's not just to show you the latest number. And what it is showing is that there are a tremendous amount of opportunities. That a lot of women are taking advantage of those opportunities. What it shows, in terms of program or policy action, is that more attention should be paid, I think, to helping women who are starting businesses to grow those businesses. And we now, in the United States, have a very positive trend now with our Women's Business Center program. For the last decade or more, it has been flat funded and also in danger of losing all of its funding. Back before I started my business, I was at the National Women's Business Council, which is an advocacy body, federally funded, and we were constantly advocating against zero funding and doing away with women's business centers. And what's important about women's business centers, and there are a number of them in Canada as well, is that women not only lead their businesses in a different way, they learn in a different way. And so I think there are implications in this research for technical assistance and support and mentorship that is gender aware and that is supportive of the way women want to start and grow their businesses.
Ooh, that's really interesting. Can you be a little bit more specific about what you mean by that?
Well, a lot of business assistance that's, the one-size-fits-all sort of business assistance is transactional. You come in, you take a class and learn some skill, and then you leave. A women's business center is relational. They may be teaching the same sort of nuts and bolts about how to start a business, but the whole methodology is one that you come into a community, you have a peer support network, you have some one-on-one counseling, you may come back after a period of time and even teach a class. And so it's very longitudinal, relational, and much more in keeping with the way women want to learn and lead in a more collaborative way.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And I think that one of the points that you made that I want to pick up on is that, in Canada and I believe in the US, there are existing supports that can certainly be increased around helping and supporting women to start businesses. Where I personally see a gap is between starting and scaling. So there's lots of support at the top of the food chain. There's lots of support at the beginning for really sort of seedling companies. But there's that whole middle section where a woman has, it's an established business. It's not new. She's really looking at scaling that business up. And that, in my opinion, is where the big gap is.
That's true. I mean, that's why it's called the missing middle, right? There's a lot of attention paid to getting people into business. And then if you are a shoot for the stars, sexy equity capital bound business, or you're at the very large end already, then people fawn over you and pay a lot of attention to you. But everybody in the middle, which is essentially, 95% of the business population, is kind of left to themselves. And for women and for men, I think peer groups become even more important at that stage. And having some mentor-protege relationships that, they don't necessarily have to be one-on-one. They can be, small group setting. I mean, that's what's missing, getting more women to find each other and to get some support and mentoring, by women who are a couple of steps ahead, not too far ahead. I think that's where women's business associations come in very handy, to have the kind of sisterhood groups that really can support you and to provide the personal case studies of, here's how I dealt with that issue or that challenge.
Fascinating. Yeah. And of course, there are some incredible organizations that do that. Now you, Julie, are not just a brilliant researcher and thought leader in this space, but you are an entrepreneur yourself. Do I have that right?
I am. Yep.
So I would love for you to tell us about your organization, Womanable, and how it got started.
I started Womanable 11 years ago after having a career in research and in public policy. I worked in a private market research firm, then went to Washington and worked in our U.S. Small Business Administration, then a private sector foundation that studied women's entrepreneurship, and then back into the government with the National Women's Business Council. And I saw a need to focus on the infrastructure supporting women's entrepreneurship. I mean, there's a lot of growth in women's business associations and in one-on-one kind of training and assistance of women business owners as an individual or in small groups, but there wasn't as much attention being paid to the laws, the policies, and the programs. And so Womanable focuses on learning where the needs and gaps are in an environment, in the U.S. or in other countries, and then working with the enablers of women's entrepreneurship to gather and share knowledge in a way to reduce the barriers for growth for women-owned businesses.
Fascinating. And so tell me a little bit about, some of the major turning points in your business over the last 11 years, because I know that there are women who are listening today who are interested in starting their own businesses, perhaps based around some form of research model or support model like you're doing. Tell us about, some of the main turning points in your business.
When I started my business and hung out my shingle, I didn't even really know if somebody was going to call, right? And there's that moment, you build up your anticipation, you're positive, then you open the door and it's like, okay, is anybody going to walk through the door?
That's right.
But it started right away. I got a small contract with the International Finance Corporation, which is part of the World Bank. And then, I had over the course of my previous career built up a lot of connections and friendships, and a lot of colleagues. So, the word started getting out. There's a lot of interest in women's entrepreneurship internationally among, policymakers, among corporations, among, non-governmental organizations that want to invest and support women-owned businesses. So I'm kind of there to help them learn where that investment might best be placed and to kind of monitor and see, is it working?
Got it.
So a lot of the work I do, in addition to doing something like the State of Women-Owned Businesses report, which has been a phenomenal partnership with American Express Open over the last 6 years. There's been work with governments, with our U.S. Agency for International Development, with other corporations or multilaterals that are really wanting to study what's going on with women-owned firms. And some of the work that I've done is actually, a survey's been done, say, in a number of countries, and guess what? Nobody thought to look at the gender aspect of this issue, like business formalization. So I did some work with the IFC after the fact, a secondary analysis saying, are there any differences between women and men in their perception of the benefits of formalizing their business? And this is in developing economies where a business would start out informally trading and not really registering their business. So it's interesting that kind of after the fact they're like, oh, gee, we forgot to look at gender.
That's right. So a question about that then, you have had, you have parlayed essentially a business that you opened as a consultancy 11 years ago. And within a short period of time, 5 years, you had really positioned your business as a research and advisory powerhouse capable of securing American Express Open as a client. So I'm very interested in learning what were some of the key things that have enabled you to build a business and a brand that's capable of that type of partnership that other women who are listening might be able to learn from and apply in their own businesses.
Yeah, I think the general lesson learned there is perseverance and just being relentless. I mean, not relentless in a bad way, but just not giving up, just knowing where you want to go and what needs to happen. I mean, because you're starting a business, hopefully, with some passion about what you're doing, you're seeing a need that you know that you can fill better than anybody else. And so you have to just keep that belief, and you have to keep going, because there are going to be all sorts of people along the way who will say, oh, you can't do that, or, who do you think you are trying to do that? So you just have to ignore the naysayers along the way and just persevere. I mean, I think that's probably the number one piece of advice that I would give, or perhaps that anybody would give, is just stick with it, because success doesn't typically come overnight. When you're looking around and seeing somebody that you think is an overnight success, they probably aren't. You're just noticing them now, but they've had a long slog, getting through the valleys and the swamps to get to the high ground. So you just keep it up.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. Entrepreneurship truly is a roller coaster. And one of the things that I see in working with women entrepreneurs is that if you are on the low point of the roller coaster, it doesn't mean that your idea is bad, that nobody wants to do business with you, that it just means you're simply on the lower part of the roller coaster. That's
true. And it does take a while before other people, meaning potential customers or partners, would notice you. So because when you're down in a valley or in the swamps, you're on lower ground perhaps than they are, so they're not noticing you. So you just have to keep it up and, move to that higher ground. And I would say another thing that's important is teamwork. I mean, you're not going to do it by yourself. And whether or not you have as a goal to build up a whole lot of employees and grow a big business, or whether you want to pull together colleagues and do projects together, the gig economy, so to speak, you need to have a team to make a success. You're not going to do it as brilliant as all women are, right? We're not going to do it ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sort of feeds into the scalability conversation, which is at a certain point, while you may have started as a solo entrepreneur, even though you may not have employees, you may be working with freelancers and so on, at a certain point, your biggest limit to growth becomes yourself, and your own ability to execute on your own. And it really is critical to bring in support and help. That's a great point.
Absolutely, because, nobody is an expert in every single area, and you need to make sure that you are balancing your strengths with your weaknesses, and where that you're not strong, hire that strength.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the Jack or Jill of all trades, and nobody can be an expert in everything. So you have to bring in team members that fill other needs. And thirdly, I would say have fun. For goodness sakes, don't have some peers, have feedback, with other women who are sharing this journey with you, and men too, I suppose. But just, share experiences, bounce around ideas. Don't do it in isolation, because a team, even though, that's not the same thing as external peers to just kind of debrief with and let your hair down and, have some fun.
Awesome. Before I let you go, is there anything else about the report that you wanted to mention that I haven't yet asked you about that's important for our listeners to know?
Well, I think one of the really important aspects of it in terms of the audiences for it is that we have a lot of geographic information too, because people who are in either women's business associations in different states, or local or state government folks, or other people who are operating in a particular geographic area, find the information that's specific to their area extremely powerful. So one of the things that we realized early on was that, a report with national numbers and big picture trends can only have so much of an impact. Having information that's detailed and specific for different audiences is also very important. So, if a study like this was done in Canada, you wouldn't expect to just talk about Canadian numbers. The Nova Scotia is very different from Alberta or Ontario or BC or any of the other provinces in between. So having that kind of specific information is very valuable as well.
Got it. So where can listeners go, first of all, to get their hands on the report?
Womenable.com. That's where they can go. There's a nice picture and button on the front page that'll take you right to the information. There's an executive report, and then there's a more detailed report with all of the tables for number cruncher types like me.
Excellent. So womenable.com, we'll have a link to your website in our show notes. And I highly encourage, whether you are a woman entrepreneur, whether you're working in a corporate environment, interested in getting a good grasp on the women's market, or you are working in government or at a women's business association or support organization, this is a critical piece of research that really gives a much broader, hopeful and realistic picture of what's going on in terms of the state of women-owned businesses in the United States. Julie Weeks, on behalf of all the fierce women of the world who are tuning in today, I want to thank you so much for making the time to share with us your work and also for the work that you're doing.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
All right, there you have it. Our interview, Fierce Ones, with Julie Weeks of Womanable. You can go to eleanorbeatonpodcast.com/19 for the show notes, and we're going to link to Womanable's website. And if you just can't wait to get your hands on the report, and I encourage you to do so, you can also head directly to womenable.com to learn more about wonderful Julie Weeks, to read the report, and to really get some great knowledge around the state of women-owned businesses. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, stay fierce. Are you an entrepreneur who sells your knowledge or expertise? If so, I want to tell you about a brand new free training webinar that we have coming up that is going to teach you the 3 stories you must tell in order to become a globally recognized expert, to attract influential clients, and to increase the sales in your business. Go on over to eleanorbeaton.com/stories that sell to register for this webinar. Over the course of the 60 minutes, I'm going to show you why so many women coaches and consultants struggle to replace their corporate salaries when they launch their businesses, the 3 stories that you must tell in order to command respect, clients, and negotiate high fees as an expert in your field. I'm going to give you a behind-the-scenes look at how I have earned a significant income as a thought leader from my base in small-town Canada. And I'm going to give you the exact sales and marketing structures you need in order to build a healthy, multiple 6-figure business as a coach, consultant, or service provider who is paid for your expertise. We would love to have you join us for this incredible free training. Go on over to eleanorbeaton.com/stories that sell to get yourself registered. Thanks so much, and we'll see you inside the training.
Thank you for listening to Fierce Feminine Leadership. Be sure to head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. While you're there, leave us a fierce review. When you leave a review, your name is automatically entered into a monthly draw. Each month, we'll draw 1 reviewer to automatically receive a private coaching session with women's leadership expert Eleanor Beaton. So remember, head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Then leave us a review for your chance to win a private coaching session with Eleanor Beaton. Go to eleanorbeatonpodcast.com and sign up to get your free cheat sheet, the 5 critical leadership skills of 7-figure businesswomen. This free download will help you diagnose the exact skills you need to see major growth in your business and career. Head over to eleanorbeatonpodcast.com and get your free download today.